Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to session three of Service Desk Plus Cloud's masterclass. My name is Ram. I'm one of the product specialists from the product support team for Service Desk Plus Cloud, and I will be the presenter for today. In today's session, we are going to learn about change management and how you can effectively implement a change process with Service Desk Plus Cloud. Right before we get started, I'm just going to run through the few housekeeping items for the attendees who are joining in fresh. So all the attendees are on mute by default. So if you have any questions during the masterclass, we have a Q&A panel on the left-hand side of the screen. So you can post your queries, you can send it across to us, and we have a Q&A session at the end of this presentation, and we will be answering it at that time. And a recording of this masterclass will be sent across to you in a couple of days. So if you feel like you have missed out a particular section, or you want to revisit a particular section, you could always do that. So we will be sending it to you in a couple of days. And if you have any queries or feedbacks post this session, you have my email address on screen. That is sriram.ks@manageengine.com. And you also have hello @servicedeskplus.com. So you could post your queries over there. And as always, you could reach to our support teams, and we will be glad to answer your queries as well. Right. And before we go further, just a quick run through on the agenda. So first up, we will take a look at what is change management, define change management, right? And we will see what are the key components that are required to build an effective change management process. And we will see how Zilka managed major change in their organization. And I will take you through a demo on showing you the various capabilities of Service Desk Plus Cloud with regards to change management. So let's see what is a change management, right? And before we get started, you need to know, right, what are the stumbling blocks that would a technician or a service desk team or a change management team would come across in implementing a change, right? So we have come across five factors that are very essential in order to implement a change successfully, right? So those are assess the ability to assess the change, right? The necessary skills to implement the change, the right incentives for the change, right? And there are appropriate resources available, right? And I'm sorry, adequate amount of resources available, and there is a definitive action plan that is in place to implement a change successfully, right? Now, if any of those factors miss, right, it's going to create, right, a lot of chaos, right? For example, let's say the technician does not have the right skill, right, to implement the change, right? Then it's going to create anxiety, right? So whether he's doing it right, whether he would feel doubtful about implementing that change, right? And if there is no right incentives because of the change, there would be resistance, right, in taking up the change. Why would anybody do it if it's not be for any good, right? And if there are no proper resources available, right, then it's going to cause frustration, right? So let's say there are no adequate number of teams or technicians available, then it's going to be a hassle for implementing the change. And if you do not have a definitive action plan, then it's going to create a false start, right? So you might take a misstep that might create a series of blocks again, right? And it's going to result in chaos. Now, a change can be classified into three types, right? We can call it as a standard change, the major change, and an emergency change, right? What is a standard change? The standard change is the one that is pre-authorized, right? It comes with a pre-approvals, because there would be an established process for implementing that particular change. An example would be, even let's say you are doing a rules upgrade on a web application firewall, correct? So that could be a strategy because it's a definitive. You might have definitive set of process already, so it does not require any approval as such. Now, what is an emergency change? Now, let's say due to this particular upgrade, right, it brought down the production system, right? That could be considered as an emergency change, where you would have to bring in the production system back up and running again, right? And then by doing a rollback of the rule upgrade, right? So thereby that's classified as an emergency change. And what is a major change? A major change is the one that will have a very high risk and that will have a higher impact, right? Because it could disrupt the production environments if it's not done without any proper planning. And the example for that would be a firewall upgrade as such, right? Now, what is required to make sure a change is successfully implemented in an organization, right? So we have come up with four key components, right? So we call it as define, plan, implement, and sustain. So the first thing that you need to do is define the change, right? What is changing, and make sure that the change is aligned to the company's vision, right? And clarify what is changing, why it is changing, what are the roles that are involved in this particular process, who are all the stakeholders that need to be notified, that needs to be aware that something is changing in the organization, right? And make sure a project's timeline is established and a deadline is set so that the change is done within that specified time frame. Once you have defined that, then you can go ahead and do a planning, right? So by you can conduct some impact analysis and stakeholder assessments, you can create the change and come up with an stakeholder engagement plan on how this change is going to be rolled out, what are the measures that are taken, identify the risks that are involved, and if there are any risk involved, come up with a mitigation process to handle those risks, right? And you also make sure you come up with a rollout plan and a backup plan if something fails, right? If something doesn't work, you have to put the system back into the last known good state. So once you have done both of them, you can go ahead and implement the change in your organization, right? So how you can do that? First up, you engage with the right leaders, right? Associate and engage with the right leaders, bring in the right technicians to execute the change, move the change through various stages in a gradual and an organized manner, right? Monitor the change, manage resistance if they are not taking up the change. If they need to be educated, let them know about it, right? And deploy risk mitigation steps if something goes wrong, right? And also the once the change is implemented, you would need to sustain the change. You need to make sure that the implementation was a success, right? You also need to monitor that the change was adapted properly. If there are any behaviors that needs to be reinforced, go ahead and let the people know about it. Also do reports, right? Make sure you run reports to understand how the change was done, whether there were any lags, whether there were any process that could have been done much better. Thereby, the subsequent changes can be handled efficiently in the organization, right? So those are the components of a change. Now let's see how a company called Zilker, right, handled a major change in their organization, right? Zilker is an SMB. They decided to migrate their on-premise infrastructure completely to the cloud, right? And they wanted to do it because of the speed of the cloud, the availability, the reliability, and the security on the cloud, right? But it's not a small process as such. It is a large undertaking, as it involves moving applications, people, and data, right? For example, Zilka is currently running the AD locally. They have their mail servers running locally, right? And the applications are hosted locally. File share is present locally, right? So everybody is able to have access to it within the network, right? Now, moving that into the cloud is not one small step, right? So you need to make sure the users are moved first, the applications are available, right? The mails are available, like throughout the year, like without any hindrance by anybody, right? So this is one big change, and if anything goes wrong, it could result in chaos in the organization, right? And as always, Zilker did not have a proper change management process, right? Because of which things started falling apart. Like Zilker considered every change as as the same kind. So, irrespective of whether it was a standard change, whether it was a complex or an emergency change, right? They had one single process for it. They decided, right? It's going to be one size that's going to fit all. They didn't want to have multiple processes. Let's just stick to one single process and then do a change, right? That in reality, that is not right. That's going to create a lot of chaos, right? Like for example, like as the next thing, they had unexpected setbacks, right? And they had unplanned outages. They didn't have proper resources available because they didn't do proper planning, right? They did not communicate to the right stakeholders, and they did not communicate when they are going to do the change, and which resulted in a downtime, and they started facing resistance from the company, right? They did not want this change to go ahead, right? And they also did not have a proper approval mechanism, which resulted in delays in triggering the approvals, and associated processes were also delayed because of the approval delay, right? And Zilker did not have a uh, systematic manner or like a linear way in handling a change, right? And they didn't have a proper change life cycle, right? Which resulted in many other issues. They did not have a proper rollback plan, which led to loss of data, and they did not have a clear visibility, right? They were not able to track the change, track the implementation, which led to a lot of confusion. And without any automations available, they were not able to speed up a change's life cycle, right? So what Zilker could have done, how they could have stepped in the right direction in order to handle a change like that, right? So that's what we're going to see now. So with Service Desk Plus, any SMB, right, will now be able to handle a standard, major, or emergency changes with customizable workflows, with their own templates, right? Everything could be defined individually for each of their change types and the change processes in their organization. They will also be able to break a change down into 8 different stages to make sure that the change executes in a systematic manner, right? And they can come up with an impact analysis. They will be able to come up with a rollout plan, backout plan, implementation plan, and drive the change to success, right? And they can also make sure communication is done effectively by triggering out automatic notifications, make sure that the change is visible to the key stakeholders in their organization. They can also build a visual workflow, right? And automate actions like approvals and notifications, configure different change types, configure different statuses, right? And also they can make sure they conduct a post implementation review to make sure that there are no further glitches in the change process, right? And not they don't have to stop right there. They can also do reporting, right? Analyze the change metric to continually improve their change process in the organization. So this is what we are going to see now. So I'm going to take you into the application to show you the features and the capabilities of Service Desk Plus and how you can implement an effective change management solution, right? So now I'm logged into the application as an administrator, right? So first up, we will see what are the ways a change can be created in the application. As always, and you can simply go in. If you have access as a technician to the change management tab, you can go to changes and you will be able to create a new change, right? This will load up the form for me. I will be able to fill in the necessary details and I will be able to create a change, right? We will come back to this in a moment. So what are the other ways of creating change? Now, let's say, for example, you were doing one such upgrade in your organization, and that started that brought the production instance down, and you are having a lot of incidents that are getting created because of it, right? So in that case, what you could do is you can go in to the request tab, right? And I'm just going to use this incident as an example. So let's just open up that incident. And if I go in, I will have an option to create a new change from here, right? So I'm going to give an impact just for demo purpose. So I'm going to say the impact is affects business, urgency is it is affecting production. First, this for this particular request. Now, if I go ahead and create a new change, right? It again loads up a change template for me. It also gathers the information from the request itself, right? Like who's the change requester, what's the impact, what's the priority, and all that is gathered. And I will be able to fill in the other information as a technician, and I will be able to create a change. Likewise, you will be able to convert a problem to a change as well. So you can do that by going opening a problem, and you have the associated change button. From here, you will be able to create a new change, or if there is an existing change that is already created, right, you can also attach it. So if you click on attach, it'll show you all the changes that are currently available, and I will be able to choose a change, and I will be able to associate it to this particular problem in the application, right? So those are the ways that you can create a change. Right now, let's go ahead and see how you can create a change from here. So if I click on new change, this loads up my new change template. This template is customizable as per your organization's preference. We will be seeing that momentarily, right? So you can specify who is the requester, who is creating this particular change. So I'm going to put it as Catherine, right? And I'm going to say who's going to be the change owner, basically the technician that is going to work on this. So for now, I'm going to be the one that's going to handle this, and I can also be a change manager. The change manager is the one that is going to oversee the change. He will have full control. He makes sure that the change process is effectively followed and fulfilled in order to implement the change in the organization. And whenever a change is created, it's always created under the submission stage, and it always is under the requested status in the application, right? And you can also define the categories. So since I'm just going to use Zilker's example, um, so let's just call it, okay, I'm going to call it data management and data modification, right? I'm going to say this change is scheduled to happen from next Monday, right? And it should be completed by next Friday, right? I can specify the schedule, start and the end time. I will say what are the services that will have an impact because of this, right? So I'm going to add all the services. If there are any asset involved, I can specify that. Why I'm changing, the reason for this particular change, I can specify that information, and I will be able to create a change. So let's just call it a webinar change, right? And I can fill in and I can specify the roles, like, for example, who's going to be the change requester, who's going to be the line manager. I will be able to define that, and I will create a change, right? So that's how simple it is to create a change in the Service Desk Plus system, all right? Now, let's see how you can make use of those components that I was talking about, right? How you can build templates, how you can define statuses, how you can define change types, right? So if I go into setup and under customization, I will have change management, right? Over here, I can first of all define what are the change types that I need to define a process for in my organization, right? So by default, you will have standard, major, minor. You can have an emergency change, and this green check mark indicates that this particular change is a it is pre-approved, right? So let me just increase the size as it was requested. I hope it is visible now, right? Okay, yeah, so this green check mark indicates that this particular change is pre-approved in the application, so that does not require any approval process for it to happen. So whenever a change is created using standard change, the approval status is going to be always approved, right? You can also create your own change type again and mark it as pre-approved if required, or it's completely up to the organization's preference, right? The next thing that I was talking about is, right, so we have defined the change types. The next thing that we need to do is break down the change into 8 custom stages, right? 8 stages, right? So if I go into stage and status under change management, these are the default 8 stages that you have, right? You cannot create a custom stage, but you will be able to create custom statuses under each stage, right? So the stages range from submission to planning, cab implementation, user acceptance testing, release, review, and close, right? So those are the 8 default stages. And if I open up a stage, I can create a custom status, right, by clicking on add. And for each and every stage, right, you will be able to define a notification template, right? So whenever a change hits this particular stage, right, you will be able to notify certain users from the application with an email, right? So you can notify the change roles, which I will be explaining it to you in a moment, right? Or you can accept the org roles, which we saw in the past 2 webinars, right? So you can create, let's say I'm going to notify change roles, right? So in this case, it's in the submission stage. So I want my change owner and the change manager to be notified about it. And this template is completely customizable. So if I hit the $sign, it will show me all the fields that I can include as part of my notification template, right? So that is how you can create a custom status, and you can also define notifications for your predefined status that comes with the application out of the box, right? So those are stage and status in Service Desk Plus. And as always, a change is always under the submission stage and it's always under the requested status, right? Next up is the roles. Change roles are basically you are defining what action or what permission will that user have when he is associated to a particular change role in the change template, right? In a change, like for example, let's say I am a change owner in one of that stage, right? So that means I will have some a higher privilege, but in another change I can just be a line manager or even a reviewer, right? So a change role for a technician or for a user can vary from each and every change in the application, and you define that over here. So these are the default change roles that you have, and change manager is the highest role, right? It is applied for any technician that is assigned with the SD change manager role in the application, right? So you can how do you define roles is under users, technicians, you define that role, right? And you cannot customize change manager's permission because that's the highest permission, but all the other roles are customizable. Like for example, change, let's see what are the permissions a change owner will have. So change owner can only be a technician again. You can specify whether he needs to have edit permissions in planning and cab stage, right? So if you want, you can restrict them. And you can also create a customized change role, right? You can have a give it your own name, and you can specify who are all the users that are going to play a part of this role. It could be both end users and technicians. So requesters can work on a change. They don't need a technician license for it, right? And whenever you create a role, if you choose all users, so it could be anybody. And over here, you can specify what kind of action they need to, what kind of permission they need to have, right? So you can basically give them all permissions. Or let's say, for example, I want, so I'm just going to call this planning manager, right? That's my role. And I'm going to say this particular person can have view, by default, they will have view permission for all the stages. Over here, I can specify this person can have, needs to have edit permission only under the planning stage, and approve action only under the planning stage. Approve action is nothing but, excuse me, I'm so sorry. This particular user, right, will be able to move the change from one stage to another. So if I choose approve, that means this particular user can move the change from planning to the cab evaluation stage in the application. So likewise, you will be able to customize the change roles and assign it, right? So I'm just going to create this role for this demo purpose to show you where you can add the role, right? So we have now seen how you can define change types, how you can define change statuses, and how you can define roles for the change and what kind of a permission they need to have. Now, you would need to bring them into place, right? Bring them into play. Where you can do that is under the templates. So you can create change templates. So you can have as many change templates as you like, right? And if you click on a new change template, this will be your canvas, right? I'm going to call this Zilker template, right? And over here, you see a type. This is not change type. This is just a template type, right? So there are two types for a template. One is general and the other one is emergency. I will tell you the use of it as we course through the demo. Please remember this field, right? And then this is your canvas. You can remove the fields that you want. You can add the fields that you want. Some of the fields are by default, so you won't be able to remove them, right? So and so you can also make field mandatories as such, right? So these are your roles. So you have your change requester, change owner, change manager. Those are the mandatory roles for in order for a change to function in the application. You have your stage and status right here. Additionally, you can create your own fields and group them, right? For example, let's talk about grouping. You have a thing called section over here, and under section, let's you can create a section of field. So I'm going to call it, right, for this purpose as impact analysis, where I will simply drag the impact field, the urgency field, and the priority field. Just it is simply for me to group the fields together, so I have a better view of the particular template, and I can also gather mandatory fields and the mandatory values in order to process the change effectively, right? And you can create additional fields as well from here. So you have single line, multi-line, pick list, numeric, date and time, even web URL type of fields. So all you have to do is simply drag and drop, create the field right here, give a name, give a default value, whether you want to set a character limit, you can specify all that, and you can create a field, right? So it's pretty simple to customize a change field, right? And again, and then you have something called reason for a change, right? So let me just take you back into the admin portion quickly. And I forgot to say, all right. So over here, you can define the reason why a change is being created. So these are the predefined reasons that we have. You can also create your own reason as well. So whenever a change is being created, right, you can just gather a value on why this change is being created in the application, right? So let's just quickly go back and create our uh, save our template. So I'm just going to call this Zilker template, right? And where's my field? Let's just quickly add it, impact analysis, and impact, urgency, and priority, right? So let me, so this is your reason for change field. You can also make it mandatory so people don't miss out on filling that out, right? And if you want to include your CMDB as well, so Service Desk Plus comes up with a CMDB module. If you want to tie it up with your change management process, all you have to do is drag this CI field and place it over here, right? So, and you can, so this will basically list out all the CIs that are there. So any CI that was affected, you will be able to include it over here, right? I will show you as we course create another change, how CIs can work, play as part of a change management, right? So let me just say this template, and you see there are two tabs added on top. One is the roles field. So these are the additional roles that will play a part of my change, right? So you have change approver, right? You have line manager, reviewer, UAT owner. You can, so the custom role that we created, it's also available over here. So you can simply drag and drop it. If you want to create your own role, you can do that on the fly from here, and you can also group them together as sections, right? So you can save them, and you can also trigger tasks as part of change template, right? And you can also make sure the tasks are triggered only for a specific stage. For example, I'm creating uh, migrate out local exchange to Office 365, right? So I can say this, yeah, this is part of my implementation stage only, right? So this task is not for any other stages. It's only for my implementation. I can predefine it to a group technician, trigger it at the appropriate time only, mean basically assigning it to the technician only when it hits the implementation stage, right? You'll be able to do that and add tasks to a template in the Service Desk Plus system. And if you have multiple tasks, so let me just add a couple of more tasks quickly, right? And add them. You will be able to define task dependencies. I was fast, I'm so sorry. You can click on the task dependency button and you have your tasks populated right here. And you can simply drag a line and between them to create a dependency plan. All right. So that's how easy it is to define task dependencies as well. So we can do that by clicking on the task dependency button. Right now, we have created change templates. The next thing that we need to do is bring up customizable workflows, right? Create workflows that handles my change processes effectively. Right now, I was talking about general and emergency. Right, this is basically to define what type of a workflow will this particular change template follow. For example, if I go to setup and if I go into automation workflows, over here I can create different types of workflows. So when I click on new workflow, right, over here I can specify if it's a general or emergency. If it's emergency, it will be followed only by templates which are marked as general emergency type in the application. So I'm going to leave it as general for now. So I'm going to call it Zilker workflow, right? So the first thing that I wanted to show you is how you can define a quick workflow for a standard change and a emergency change, right? So with one, you can create multiple workflows as per your preference, or you can have one single workflow and have it traverse through different paths depending upon the change type, right? So as I said, when a change is created, it comes under submission stage and it goes into the requested status. From here, what I can do first is I want to check whether it's a standard change or if it's an emergency change, right? So I will just, for that, I can either drag a condition node. So I will just check if it's emergency change, right? I can say change type is emergency, right? So I can simply drag a line, and if it's yes, it can go another path. If it's no, it can go another path, right? But I also have another condition. So if it's just one single condition, you can use the condition node. Otherwise, you can also use a switch node, right? A switch node, you can, with the help of a switch node, you can check multiple conditions again. Like for example, whether it's a standard change or whether it's an emergency change. All right. So let me just save it. And that's my switch condition right here. So I'm just going to place it right there. And from requested, I wanted to go into to check for this particular node. If it is standard, as I said, standard changes are the ones that comes with pre-approval, right? So I'm going to put it into accepted state. And if it is in emergency, right, emergency changes are the ones that needs to be processed very quickly, right? So it needs to have one quick approval, quickly move into the implementation process, and it should be completed as soon as possible. Right, so we will create both the workflows very quickly now, right? So now let's talk about a standard change. And once it's standard, it goes into accepted, right? The next thing that I want to do is I want the teams to start planning this change, right? So I can simply drag the stage node, place it in the canvas, and over here I can choose my change types, right? So these are all the change types that I have. So I'm going to call this a planning stage. I'm going to choose what are the statuses that are part of my workflow, right? So currently its status is approved, planning in progress, and rejected. So let me save it, right? And from here, I will simply drag a line and say if it is approved, if it is accepted, under the if the status is set as accepted, it automatically moves into the planning in progress state, right? So so over here the technician can be notified with the help of the notification, status notification that I saw you, that I showed you earlier. Or you can also create a customized notification with the help of the notification node right there, right? And so now this is under planning, and once it is approved, I wanted to move into the implementation stage, right? So we don't need a cap for this, so I'm just going to choose implementation, and I'm going to say implementation is in progress, completed, and back out. Those are my statuses. I will save it, right? And once it's approved by the change owner or the change manager, I will move it into implementation in progress, right? Over here, I want to notify technicians, right, that you can start working on this particular change, right? So what I will do is I will simply drag this notification node. I can create a new notification, right? I'm going to call it begin implementation, right? And I can specify what are the roles that needs to be notified, the roles that we saw earlier. So I'm going to put it to the change owner. In this case, I'm the implementer, right? And I can also notify organization roles, cab, and the users, right? Cab, we will come in a very quick, in just a moment as we build the emergency change, right? So I can simply create a notification and select it, right? So once it is in progress, I can simply do a notification and just bring it back into the implementation in progress state as such, right? And once a technician has completed once the technician has completed implementing this change, right? You can either trigger out another notification saying, like, I have one already created. So I'm just going to use implementation completed. I want the release manager to be notified. So I'll simply choose implementation completed, and I will have a review field over here, right? I'm going to say review in progress, review failed, review completed, right? And once it is done, I will once the notification is sent out, I will put it to review in progress. Once the review is completed, I can move it to completed close in progress, and the change manager will be able to close the change in the application, right? So this could be a pretty simple process for a standard change. Whether in case if it's an emergency change, what we could do is first up quickly bring out an approval, right? So over here, I'm going to call it emergency approval, right? And you can specify who's going to approve it, whether everybody needs to approve it, anyone can approve it, or based on the first response action from the members that were selected, right? So over here, I can either put it to the change owner with the change role, organization role, or CAB, right? CAB or the change advisory board. If you want to bring in a change advisory board for an emergency change, you could do that. You can create a CAB under the change management customization CAB, right? And you can create a new CAB. Any user who has a login for the Service Desk Plus system can be added as a CAB member in the Service Desk Plus system. So you can have a number of CABs created as per your preference. And whenever you're creating a workflow, you can either select the entire CAB or select members from the CAB. So in this case, let me just choose the entire CAB, and I can trigger out an approval notification. And once the emergency cab has approved it, right? So you can have an emergency cab. I will first of all simply drag a line to connect it. Once it is approved, I can move it into the implementation in progress state, right? And rest it could follow the same procedure as per my preference. So if it's denied, I'll put it back into rejected, right? I can simply add another condition. I'm sorry, another status calling requested for information. From rejected, I can move it into requested for information, right? So likewise, you will be able to build a comprehensive, so this is a pretty simple change process. You can also build your own change process in a comprehensive way, like in a more detailed way as per your preference, right? And you can also make sure that whenever a change is created, if you want to show only the stage and status that are part of the workflow, you can do that. And you can also reorder how the change stages should be shown. You will be able to reorder it as per your own preference in the Service Desk Plus system, right? So that's a simple change workflow. We have also, okay, I have one notification which is pending. Um, all right, let's just ignore that one for now. So that's how you can create a simple workflow in the application. For Zilka's example, right? I have already created a major workflow for this demo purpose, right? We will see how you can implement this particular workflow, right? How we can traverse through this particular workflow in Service Desk Plus system right now. So for that, let's just quickly go ahead and create a change, right? So go to changes and let me create a change quickly. And let me put Sandra as the change requester, right? And I'm going to call myself as the owner and the manager. Right, and I'm going to say what are the CIs involved. So over here I'm going to choose the production server, for example, just to show you how the CI looks like, right? And I'm going to say the services that are involved are these, and I'm going to, as I said, let's just put it back to the same date from 29th to the 3rd, and I will say reason for change is upgrade. Call this as migration from on-premise to the cloud systems. All right, and I'm just going to have that as description. Over here, I can specify who are all the users that's going to work on this particular change. So I'm going to call Larry as the change owner, right? Or sorry, Dave. Right, I'm going to choose Dave as my change approver. Let's just save it. Right, so once a change is now created, right, this will be my change view. Over here it is currently showing only the changes which are part of my workflow, right? If I want, I can also change it to show all the statuses by clicking on workflow settings, show all stage and status. Let's just quickly do a reload, and you will be able to see the stages which are not part of the workflow as well, right? So over here you can see all the stages, right? Since this might be confusing, you can restrict it as per your preference. Now under the submission stage, right, you will be able to define what type of a change is it, right? And you can specify the priority, the impact, and the urgency of a change, right? As a change manager, I will be able to edit it since I have the permissions. Now, if there are any CIs associated with the change, I can click on this relationship map. That will show me what are the services that are connected to this particular CI, right? So I'm going to do a horizontal view to quickly see. So this particular server is hosting a file and folder service. It's connected to a machine over here. It is also hosted on a London server. If I expand it further, I can see if there are I'm sorry. Yeah, if I expand it further, I can see where file and folder is connected on. Likewise, I can expand to see more information regarding one particular CI and where it is also connected. Right. So that is how CMDB module ties up with the change in the Service Desk Plus system. And if you scroll down, we have all the additional information that we had collected. Right. You can see what are the roles that are involved with this particular change, what are the tasks that are associated. So if there are any tasks, it gets listed. You can also create tasks from here. And if a change is stated, change changes from one stage to another, you can find those details over here, right? And you can also find out comments. So if it was done by the workflow, the change, it will come up with this comment, or technicians can put in their own comment if they are manually doing it. Now, to understand what workflow this particular change is following, I can click on this workflow button over here, right? So this opens up the map for me, right? Okay, I think I selected the wrong workflow. Let me just quickly create another change. I'm so sorry about it. Uh, I didn't select the major workflow, right? Uh, Right, major change and major change workflow. So let me just quickly choose Sandra and Santa, right? And let me just specify these information quickly. Right. And migration from on-premise to cloud, right? And Dave is the changing one. Right. All right, let's just save it. All right, so those are currently it's in the submission and requested state. If I click on the workflow, now it is over here. This should trigger, first of all, an approval, right? So if I go in to my submission stage, let me just quickly do a reload. Right, so I'm going to open up the workflow over here simultaneously for you guys to have a quick look at it so we can go stage by stage, right? So over here, it didn't have an approval tab because the approval wasn't triggered at that moment, right? So over here, it is currently submitted for approval and it is sent to a user called Dave, all right? So I'm currently logged into the system as Dave. So this is a requester's view in the Service Desk Plus system. So I can come in over here, and if I click on approvals, I should be able to see that change, right? So I can quickly open it, right? And this loads up, quickly shows me what are the changes, what is the change that I need to approve. I can also pop it up over here by clicking on the pop-up icon, and that shows me the details of the change that I need to approve, right? So I can come into the approvals tab, or I can approve it from there. So I'm going to call it and approve it. So this change is approved, right? And let's submit it, right? So as you can see, both a requester can also be a change approver, and he will be able to view the changes that he is associated to from the changes tab over here, right? So under the changes, he will be able to see only the changes which he is associated to in the Service Desk Plus system. He will not be able to see any other change in the application, right? So this change is now approved. Let's follow the workflow. So if it is approved, it should move into the accepted state. From here, it should check for the changes risk, right? So let's see where our current workflow is at, right? So it is now moved into accepted state. And from accepted, it is checking for the change risk. And in the submission stage, our change risk is, we have not filled in the change risk. So let's just go back to our workflow, and right, and I'm just going to call it high. So when I put this change risk as high, that should trigger out a notification email, right? And once the notification is done, it should move into the planning stage, right? And over here, right now, this particular change is in the planning stage. In the planning stage, right, the technician can define the details of the change. He can specify the schedule, right? If there are any tasks associated, he can specify that, uh, and go and so on, right? So as per my workflow, right, this particular change is now in planning in progress. I put it back into approved for this purpose. But as you can see, this red line, this should actually move into the cab, but it hasn't, right? Why it hasn't? If I hover over the red line, it shows me that it has failed, right? And say there are closure rules which are violating by this particular change, right? So as part of my workflow, I want the impact details, the rollout plan to be filled in, right? So I'm just going to call it, this is an impact, right? And just gonna call the rollout plan as well. So I'm just gonna say this is my rollout plan. And so how did I do that? So how was I able to check? So this is not part of my workflow which I have built already. Rather, I did that with the help of my closure rules. So if I go into closure rules, I have changed closure rules. So over here, I have made those fields as mandatory. Whenever a change changes from one stage to another or moves from one stage to another, these details need to be filled. So over here, you can specify what are the fields that needs to be filled, without which it cannot proceed any further. Right now that we have updated it, so let's just update the backout plan as well. Right, and let me just save, and that should move the workflow to my next stage. Right, so let's just do a quick reload to see where the change is currently at. Right, so now it is approved, and it is still waiting for the closure rules. Let's see. I think there is another condition that needs to be met. All right, no, it triggered it. So as you can see, it moved into the cab stage, and it is now waiting for the approval. Right, so over here, so what we have done is we have created a cab. Right, so under the cab stage, it is approval pending, and approval was triggered. Right, we triggered it to 3 people, and I mentioned it as anyone that can approve it. So I'll just choose anyone to approve, and I'm going to choose Santa, and I'm going to call it change is approved. Right, and under each and every stage, right, you can have tasks as well. So if I go into the planning stage, you can have tasks, and also you can talk about you can have associations. Right, so if there were any requests that initiated this particular change, I can associate it. Likewise, I can associate the problems which were caused by this particular change or which triggered this particular change. So if I click attach, right, and okay, it executed the workflow. So let's just quickly attach, and it will show me all the problems that I can associate it with my change. Right, so now as per my workflow, it has come into the implementation stage in the application. Right, so under implementation, it is currently in progress. Right, and if it is completed, it can move, it will just update my field and move it into the release stage. So let me just see what happens. So as a change owner, right, I can move this to completed by coming into the in progress. Let's clicking on the status. I will choose the stage as completed. Right, so I'll quickly add it as implementation completed. So this particular status update can be done by a role which has the approve permission for that particular stage. Right, so I have updated it, and those details are also reflected as part of my history tab. Right, so under status comments, those details are over here, the status comment. Right, so currently it is in the review stage. In the release stage. Over here, I can specify the scheduled start and end time for a release, or I can also specify the actual start and end time. And if there are any downtimes, right, that was forecasted, you can add, you can add downtimes over here. So, and I can specify what was actually down, from when to when it was actually down. Right, I will be able to specify those information. And let's continue with the workflow. Right, and so once it is completed, once the release is completed, I'm just going to mark it as completed. It should move into the next stage. Right, so release done, save. Right, so that should move it into the review stage and of my change. Right, under the review stage, you will be able to make sure that the change was whether the change was successful, whether the change was taken up properly. Right, you will be able to see that. So let's just reload the page quickly. And one more thing which I missed to talk about was projects, right? So now let's say from migrating a service from the on-premise to the cloud, right? It's not one simple task as such, right? So that involves a lot of processes, that involves a lot of time, that involves a lot of planning, right? So you can always consider the change as a project as well in the application. So from here, you will be able to create a project and you will be able to associate it, right? So if I go into my projects tab, right, I can create a new project for my for this particular change, right, just like how I have done over here, right? And I will be able to specify what are the things that needs to be completed as milestones, and I can have tasks under each and every milestone to make sure this a particular change is done effectively in my organization, right? So over here I can associate a project to a change as well, right? So currently, like coming back to our workflow, this change is currently in the review stage, right? And if the review was successful, I'm gonna say review done, and I'm gonna update it, and this change will move into the closed stage as per our workflow, right? So that's how you'll be able to build an effective workflow and make sure, right, a change is progressing through the workflow and the technicians are following the process effectively in order to make sure a change was successfully done in an organization, right? So currently it's in the closed stage, right? Over here the technician can define a closure code saying whether the close was what was the close, whether it was close completed. He will be able to specify a description. So the change, I'm going to say the change was implemented successfully, right? I'm going to save it, and once it is completed, I can say change is completed, or I can simply click on close over here. So if I click close, the close comes up the close change button. I'm going to say change completed, and I can save it, right? So that is how you can build an effective workflow and have a change progress through workflow to make sure the change was implemented successfully in an organization, right? So those are the various features that can help you to build an effective change management process in an organization, right? To wind up this presentation, what's the change process that you did? Was it effective? Right, you can analyze them with the help of reports, like for example, number of changes that were created by number of incidents that were created by the change, number of the percentage of changes that outages that were unplanned, right? So you will be able to do reporting for these by clicking on the reports tab, right? And you have predefined reports for the change module. Apart from that, you will also be able to create your own custom reports for changes in the Service Desk Plus system, right? So you'll be able to do metrics reporting to understand how a change was done, whether there anything needs to be trained or educated to the technicians. You can do that. A quick recap. So we create a change from incident. As I said, you can create a change from incident, a service request, a problem, and you can also create a change from a project or associate the change to a project. And you can define change templates, change workflows to gather effective information, break down change into various stage and statuses, define the roles, right? And you can also bring in cab approvals to make sure approvals are automated and the cab teams are notified at the right times. So with that, we have come to the very end of this presentation, and just wanted to let you know we are giving you a free training and consultation. So like a 45-minute one-on-one training session with our product experts. So if you need that, you can avail it by sending an email to itsmcares@manageengine.com to book your slot. All right. So thank you so much for joining the presentation. If you have any other queries or any question that was left unanswered, please do reach out to support. We will be glad to answer and assist you with regards to the change management process. Hope you found this session useful. Thank you so much once again. Stay safe and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.